we all have the same essential inherent potential to be able to do or create or be anything, right? Like the same place that we come from is the same place that someone like Elon Musk or Albert Einstein comes from, right? Or Abraham Lincoln or whoever, someone who's accomplished something noteworthy. Whether you like them or not, you can't deny someone's accomplishments, right?
Right.
And so we all have that same inherent potential within us. The question really is, are we going to open up and let it do its thing? And if we don't open up and let it do its thing, we don't ever accomplish the big things.
Welcome to another episode of the Health Coach Academy podcast. I'm your host, Omar Cumberbatch of OmarCumberbatch.com. Really excited to share today's guest with you. His name is Dave Whitley, and just got a phenomenal story. And he comes on and just drops truth bombs about money mindset, our upbringing, and how we need to correct some of these things in order to be successful entrepreneurs. So I really appreciated him sharing all his knowledge with us. He has a workshop that's coming up too. He's going to share with us, and really just something that I think a lot of the fathers specifically are going to get out of it, because that's really his focus, and how to be a better man and being a better father and stop these generational curses that happen along the way. But ladies, don't worry about it. He drops a lot of truth knowledge about entrepreneurship too, and that's just one of the courses that he's actually putting out as well. Speaking of courses, my podcast course is out, and since it's President's Week, I am going to be giving a 20% discount on the podcast creation course. And just jump on my website, take a peek. You put in coupon code president, and I will be giving you 20% off the price of the podcast course. It's been receiving a whole lot of love, so I'm really excited about that. Creating all these new health coaches who are really interested in creating a podcast to boost their business. So just jump onto my website and get that. And of course, thank you for leaving those ratings and reviews. If you have not done so already, please do, because that's the reason I get phenomenal guests like Dave on the show. Let's jump onto it. Hey Dave, how are you today? Welcome to the show.
Doing fantastic, Omar. Thanks a lot for having me on. I'm excited.
Yeah, no, I'm very excited. Had a great conversation prior to the show off air. We have a lot in common, and it's just really excited to have you on the show to talk about just a lot of different things. I mean, you have a wealth of knowledge, a lot of history in building a business and really finding your passion. So I want to give you a little opportunity, just describe a little bit about your journey, and then we'll jump into some of the questions that I have for you around those topics.
Sure thing. I'll give you the condensed version of my background. When I was a kid, I was overweight, chubby, had a terrible stutter. And when I would get called on to do stuff like answer questions in class or stand up for book report day or something like that, I would invariably get picked on and bullied and made fun of because of these traits. And I was also naturally extroverted. So I wound up not doing... I wasn't like a terrible get in trouble all the time situation, but I was in a fair amount of trouble, kind of disruptive, most of it benign, when I was in, elementary school at this point. I became completely fascinated and enamored of the idea of superhuman powers, because I loved comic books and science fiction and fantasy and all that sort of stuff. And when I was really delving into comic books, I strongly identified with the character of the Hulk, because he was huge, he was strong, I loved the way he looked, he was just a complete unit, and he was fueled by this anger, and he was invincible, and he was invulnerable. And I, as a kid who was picked on, I really identified with that. And just kind of wrote it off as, well, that's sort of, make-believe fantasy stuff, although it's cool. And then when I was almost 8 years old, the Incredible Hulk TV show premiered, and I watched the pilot of that and saw Lou Ferrigno on there. And in my little child mind, I knew that was not a costume. And of course, special effects at the time were nothing like they are now. There was no CGI at the time. I knew it wasn't a costume. I knew that he was wearing makeup and painted green, and that he had on, a wig and prosthetics and all that. But that was really him. And at this time in history, bodybuilding wasn't something that was publicly known about. Arnold's career hadn't started yet. None of the big muscular action stars of the 80s had done their stuff yet. Like even if you go back and watch the first couple of Rocky movies, Stallone was good, but he wasn't in shape like he was in Rocky 3. So the whole physical component of that wasn't something that was prevalent in pop culture. Or just, culture in general. So seeing Ferrigno for the first time, that was the first time I saw a truly huge, strong looking human being. And something in my little child mind, switch flipped that day. And I'm like, okay, this isn't just fantasy. This is possible. So like any good 8-year-old boy did, I started looking through the classified section of the newspaper, trying to find a way to get bombarded with gamma radiation because I didn't know any other way. Right. I mean, there was no evidence to support anything other than that. A few weeks or months later, it's kind of blurry because, I was a kid. The movie Pump and Iron was on a local PBS station. And so there's Lou Ferrigno playing himself, and there's Arnold and Franco Columbu and all these top bodybuilders of the day at the 1975 Mr. Olympia. And there were these training sequences. And I'm like, oh, okay. So the way they get big and strong and are able to lift heavy things is by lifting heavy things. Got a set of weights for Christmas. And that started me down the strength and health journey. Right. And looking back on it now, I realized that at that moment in my life, I was looking for a hero that I wasn't finding anywhere at home or at school or anything like that. And so fortunately for me, Ferrigno was like my first real life hero. And that put me on the path of strength and health and fitness. Now, I know bodybuilding, the dark side of bodybuilding, drugs, all that sort of stuff, but that wasn't anything that anybody knew about back then. And I didn't learn about that until I was an adult, really. So that never entered into mine. It was just the positive aspects of it, of exercise and strength and nutrition. And I have from that point up until now, it's been an on again, off again, but mostly on love affair with strength and things to do with strength and health. In the early 2000s, literally about 20 years ago, actually, I got involved in the kettlebell world, went through the RKC training program back then with Pavel Tsatsouline and stayed with that until it evolved into Strong First. And I was a part of Strong First for several years as a master instructor. I ran a kettlebell centered gym, helping people get stronger, do physique transformation, and mindset stuff started working its way into it. At that point, I left that organization in 2016 because there was an overlap. I had met another guy named Dennis Rogers, who taught me how to be a professional performing strongman, doing things like ripping decks of cards, bending steel bars, breaking chains, driving a nail through a board without a hammer, that kind of stuff. And so in about 2011 or 2012, I thought, okay, I really want to get serious about this. And that became my primary focus. By the time 2017 rolled around, that was my full-time gig. I still had a gym, but I was in the process of getting ready to close it down. I was going around doing keynote speeches, bending steel and ripping cards for corporate crowds and stuff like that, and talking about how the mental aspects of strongman training applied to goals outside of health and strength. How you could take the same ideas of visualization and mental rehearsal and things that build your confidence and put that towards, earning more money or providing better service for your clients or building better relationships with your family. So that really became the focus of what I was doing. And I had it in the back of my mind to create a coaching program around that, started building that. And 2020 happened and my entire year got canceled. And I thought, okay, now's a good time to segue into the online training space for this mindset coaching. And so I started doing that. And concurrently with that, in 2018, my son was born. So I became a dad at age 48 in 2018. And where it used to be an adventure for me to go get on a plane and go to a city and do a show and meet people and be all that, after he was born, it became a matter of I would go to the airport and I would literally be counting down the hours until I was going to be back home and get to hang out with him. So there was a shift in my mind at that point from becoming a dad, and that became at the forefront. And then last year I started working with a new business coach, and he's like, what do you really want to do? And I'm like, really, really, really what I want to do is work with dads who have gotten their health and fitness together. They're probably doing well in a business aspect, and they realize that this fatherhood role that they've found themselves in, they find themselves sometimes speaking something and it sounds like the thing that they hated most about their parents or their upbringing coming out of their mouth, and they feel like they don't have control over it. And so that's where I am now, is helping men with kids. Usually the kids are young, like, under 10, to reprogram their own, what I call internal code, so that they can be the parent that child deserves, and that they can break those generational cycles of, like, conflicting beliefs and lack and limitation and negative thinking, so that all of those things don't get passed on to their children. And that brings us up to today.
Yeah, no, that was a great synopsis of where you are today. And I know that you touched on a lot of things there, because we all kind of are dealing with similar things that you have gone through. And it's amazing how much you've overcome, honestly, even in just describing that. I know a little bit more about that because of our off the air conversation. But one of the things that I think would be like the first question is, it seemed like you were naturally entrepreneurial. And I know that family history did not dictate that at all. So can you talk about just how you've been able to overcome sort of like the typical blue collar family idea around money and scarcity and hard work and such, to just kind of break that generational curse so effectively?
Yeah, well, I think my dad had an entrepreneurial spirit, but one of the things that I have that I inherited from him, because I heard all my life that I was my daddy made over. And, there's good and bad to that. And he passed away in 2020, and we had conversations toward the end of his life about that very thing, and about how, there were characteristics that I got from him that I absolutely cherish and am very proud of. And there were also characteristics that I got from him that needed to be overcome and needed to be dealt with and needed to be, transmuted into something else. So anytime I say anything about something unwanted that I picked up from him, it's not a slam against him. He was a product of his upbringing as well. Very, very rural Georgia, blue collar background. I think he had an entrepreneurial spark, because he would very often come up with ideas that, if they were executed and brought into reality, into 3D reality, they would have been very profitable. But he would have these ideas, and sometimes he would move on them, but then, without exception, on these ideas, almost without exception, he would wind up not following through. He would go for a little while, and then kind of the new would wear off, and he would have another idea and then go chase the shiny thing. So that's been something within myself that I've had to get around and get over. And that was coupled with the blue collar work ethic of, you go sell your time, you trade your time for money, and whatever little scraps you're able to pick up from that, you hold on to very tightly, because supply is limited and someone's always going to try to cheat you out of something or steal something, or, there's just never enough to go around. That was sort of something that was prevalent in my household as a kid. And once I reached adulthood and started reading books like Think and Grow Rich from Napoleon Hill, and like The Science of Getting Rich from Wallace Wattles, which is a book that I'm continually reading to this day, I started realizing, okay, trading time for money is the absolute worst way to build wealth. And that it's a much more effective way to do that is to provide value for people that isn't necessarily dependent on my time being invested in it at that particular moment. So if I could create something like, I have, several things that are going on online where there's video courses and stuff there, and you can go watch that and learn that. And I don't have to be there to teach it to you every single time in purpose. I'm there every single time that you show up to study or learn something. I'm there to answer questions. I'm there to help guide, but it's a guided self-study, much more than me having to explain it to every single person every single time. I started figuring that out when I was in the gym business, that from a financial standpoint and from a results standpoint as well, it made a lot more sense for me to do group coaching with multiple clients at the same time than it did for me to do one-on-one coaching, because that wound up being a win-win-win for everybody. I could make more money per session with 4 people paying, I don't even remember what my pricing was at that time, but say if I had 4 people paying $100 a session, versus one person paying $200 a session, it that just makes sense, right? And then the social element of that actually helped my clients get better results, because it wasn't just me and them. It was a collective group consciousness thing that was going on there. So I started getting turned on to that, and it's evolved into a very powerful group coaching program as well. So dealing with all that, I'm grateful that I came up the way that I did, because it showed me that there were other ways that I could do things. And it's been very fun to explore that and figure it out, and actually apply it.
Yeah, no, listen, I mean, absolutely. That's one of the things that I think of. It's really admirable about what you've been able to, like you said, transmute. I mean, we all have like these money stories, and it really is amazing. It seemed to not click with you, like, and hold you down, and you were really able to just change that direction. So you make it sound easy, but obviously it was over time.
Well, and it's the cliche between simple and easy, right?
Yeah.
Those words get used interchangeably, but deadlifting 500 pounds is pretty simple. You walk over to the bar and you pick it up, right?
Yeah.
Ultimately. But if your current 1 rep max is 185, and like if a fly lands on the bar, you drop it, true 1 rep max, 500 pounds is a long way off. So it's not easy, but it's a simple process to get there. And the simplicity and the consistency and the mental aspect of being the person who can already do the thing in your mind sets you up so that there's no other choice except to be the person who can actually do the thing in 3D reality. There's just a time lag, mentally, like intellectually and emotionally too. We can time travel anytime we want to, right? And anyone who thinks that sounds silly, I'm going to ask you to go back and revisit an important moment in your past, like the day you got married. I'm sure that everyone who's listening to this, if they had a wedding, or even if they didn't have a big wedding, the day they got married, they remember things about that. If you have children, you remember the childbirth part, right? You may not remember several weeks after that because you're sleep deprived, but you remember that moment, and that moment's gone. Like an hourglass, that's the sand that's in the bottom. And the only sand that we're aware of is the sand that is passing through the middle at the moment, right? There's a quote that I love from one of my favorite authors named Neville Goddard. And he says that through the portal of the present, the whole of time must pass. So we experience time in the now. And being able to take that mental and emotional ability and put myself into the future the same way I can remember something from the past, it's the same. So I can go and literally become the person that I want to be in my mind, intellectually and emotionally, even if I'm not there physically. And that applies to any area of life: health and fitness, money, relationships, any of those things. And so understanding that is a very powerful thing, because at that point, you then become the creator of your own future.
So I guess the natural follow-up to that, and I know a lot of people struggle with it, I struggle with it as well. What are your suggestions on as far as tips of like really getting into what we actually want so that we can envision this existence that we actually want to become?
Well, at that entry point that you're describing is where I connect with a lot of people. And the question that I ask is one that it can be very difficult for people to answer, because the question is, and it sounds like such a simple question, but it's really profound. The answer is, what do you want? What do you want? How do you really want your life to be? And the vast majority of the time that I ask that question from someone who's looking to do something different, but they don't know how, and they don't know what the process to get there would be, is they will start telling me things that they would like to have based on, or experiences they would like to have, or how they would like their life to be, based on what they think is possible, based on what they've already accomplished. Right. And so the real danger in that is not thinking big enough, and not acknowledging the fact that we all have the same essential inherent potential to be able to do or create or be anything, right? Like the same place that we come from is the same place that someone like Elon Musk or Albert Einstein comes from, right? Or Abraham Lincoln or whoever, someone who's accomplished something noteworthy. Whether you like them or not, you can't deny someone's accomplishments, right?
Right.
And so we all have that same inherent potential within us. The question really is, are we going to open up and let it do its thing? And if we don't open up and let it do its thing, we don't ever accomplish the big things. And so there's a certain amount of fear that is based on previous conditioning. There's a certain amount of limitation that's based on previous conditioning that, like someone who grew up in my situation, if you would have told me or anyone that knew me when I was 9, 10 years old, that I would ever be standing up on a stage in front of, hundreds of people, or I've done events where it's been live streamed and I've literally spoken to tens of thousands of people live streaming from a stage with a live audience, talking to people all over the world. If you would have told that fat stuttering kid that he was going to get up there and not only was he going to speak, but he was going to speak with authority, and that not only was he going to speak with authority, but he was going to do these insane feats of strength like bending wrenches and ripping decks of cards in half, people would have wondered if you were crazy. And yet that's exactly what I wound up doing. And it was not until I consciously realized that I was thinking too small. I was like, okay, what's possible for me to do? When I let that go and instead of thinking, what do I believe is possible for me to do? And started thinking of, what do I really want to do? Who do I really want to be? Whether I think it's possible or not is irrelevant. Let's just play in fantasy world for a little bit, because that's exactly what happened to me when I was a kid. I can look back and pinpoint wanting to be the Hulk and then deciding that I would go down that road of being strong. And then, a few decades later, I'm bending steel bars like the Hulk. Mm-hmm. So understanding that thinking small is probably the biggest obstacle in your path right now is a great place to realize that you are, because it's easier to think big. The difficulty comes in having the confidence in yourself to be able to accomplish the big thing. And that's a skill that can be taught.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think one of the things that you brought up too is, like, again, you had the vision, but you're very passion driven as well. Totally. Can you talk about how that identifying the passion that you have has dictated your next move and has created some of these opportunities, especially what you have going on now?
Sure. Well, through becoming a strongman, a performing strongman, and speaking and the coaching program that evolved out of that, all of that was wonderful. And I'm just so grateful that I went through that experience and have done all of those things. But now with my son, who's 4 years old, I'll go out. I train outside almost exclusively. I'll go out and I've got all this strongman gear set up out there, and I'll go practice feats or whatever. And he has just naturally started mimicking me, because that's what kids do. They model much more than they pick up from me, from us as adults, teaching and explaining things to them. Right. I mean, I could tell him over and over again to do something related to a particular feat or whatever, throwing a ball or whatever. But if I show him, if I model it for him, he picks up on it much quicker. It's the truth of the cliche that the kids are always watching. And to kind of put some context on that, recently we were outside in my training area, and he's seen me drive nails through a board without a hammer hundreds of times in his short life. And he, for a couple of years, has wanted to do it, to play with it. Right. And so I'll wrap the nail up and hand it to him, and he'll smack it against the board and have fun with it. And it doesn't, penetrate the board or whatever. But I guess a couple of months ago, we were out there, and he wanted to give it a try. and I wrapped the nail up and gave it to him, and he hit it with this beautiful form, perfect technique. And I've never explained the technique to him. He's just seen me do it so much that he's downloaded it into his neural pathways, right? And he hits it, and the nail sticks in the board. And he like lets go of it and looks, and he's like, it's stuck. And then he looks underneath to see if it went all the way through, and he said it didn't go all the way through. I happened to catch that on video, and I put it on TikTok, and he's had as of like last week 3.5 million views on him doing that feat of strength, right? Yeah. And I could have never imagined anything like that for him, but there he is, and he's doing this perfect nail drive. And like literally the only thing that stopped the nail from going all the way through is the board was too thick for his current level of ability. That's it. Everything else is perfectly lined up. So knowing that, I didn't have to teach him that. He just had to be around me when I was doing it, and be around me while I'm thinking about it, and being in that energetic vibrational space of this being something that I do, and it being important, and that being part of my identity. He's picked up on it. And if he never attempts another feat of strength in his life from this day forward, I'm fine with that. I want him to do what he wants to do and be who he wants to be. But it is really cool and a really interesting lesson to see him do something like that I've never tried to teach him. I've never discouraged him from it, but I've never said, hey, do you want to go do some feats, or do you want to go work out? He just comes with me, and he does it naturally. So I just, I provide the exposure to it and let him decide how he wants to go with that. Now, the interesting thing to me about that is, in what other areas of life am I, as a father, exhibiting something or being in like the vibrational frequency mental state of something that he's also picking up on, right? And when I realized that he's literally absorbing everything that is going on around him, it became very important for me to realize that it's incumbent upon me to be the man that I want him to become, right? Not that I want him to become me, but like to exhibit the characteristics that I want him to exhibit, right? Right. And so from before he was born, from the time that we found out that we were going to have a baby, my wife and I sat down and wrote out various things that we wanted to, values we wanted to instill, or characteristics that we thought were important that we wanted him to develop. And I still have the lists pinned to my corkboard next to my desk. But fast forward a few years after he's born, and this is a really good example of how this plays out. We were at the park literally yesterday, and he walks up to this other kid, and he says to this kid, "Hi, I'm Liam. Do you want to be friends with me?" And the kid says, "Yeah." And he says, "Let's go play together." And they ran off and started playing together. Well, one of the things that we wrote on our list was kindness, and so that's what he did. He went up and introduced himself. Now, I didn't tell him to go do that. He just saw this kid who was playing by himself and went up and decided it would be fun to play with him. Another example of that kind of thing is we were playing outside on a swing set thing that we have here at home, and he's up on the top of the slide, and he hasn't slid down the slide for a while, and he kind of had this weird look on his face, and he says, "Daddy, I feel a little bit nervous," which is what he says anytime he's feeling any apprehension or fear or anything like that. And I said, "Why do you think that is, buddy?" And he said, "Oh, I haven't done this for a while." And I said, "Well, that's okay that you're a little bit nervous about it. You don't have to do it if you don't want to. And it makes sense that you would feel that way." So I'm validating how he feels instead of telling him not to be a little wimp and to slide down. And there's nothing, so I'm meeting him where he is, which is something that I decided I needed to do. Right. And so he says, "Is it okay if I say my I ams?" And I said, "Yeah, sure." Now, to qualify that, he goes back, and there's this list of things that we've said to him since before he, since literally since he was born. And he recites this list back to me from the top of the slide. He says, "I am brave. I am kind. I am strong. I am smart. I can do anything." And then with this big gleeful grin on his face, slides down the slide and has this big celebration of "Daddy, I did it." And that's a cool story and all, but what's really going on there is he has internalized these desirable qualities that my wife and I talked about and wrote down before he was even born, so much to the point that he can identify, and this isn't a conscious thing, this is just him doing it, right? he can identify that he's in a spot where he's feeling some fear and some apprehension, and he has tools internally that he can draw on to get himself into the state to face the fear and do the thing. Mm-hmm. And that was so powerful for me because, how often am I myself unable to do that? How many grown men and women do I know that are never able to do that, to realize that I'm in a place where I feel fear, but I know that I have the capacity to do it. And I know that I have tools that can put me in the state that I need to be in order to do the stuff. Right. Mm-hmm. And so let's translate that into regular people who might be, or not regular people. We're all regular people, but like other people, the audience, the people that might be listening to us right now. Right. And how can we apply that? Well, how often as entrepreneurs or as people who are involved in health and fitness, do we come across something where we feel some apprehension about it and we're not real sure how to handle it? And we wind up in a place of like, well, I just have to force myself to do this. And we grit through it thinking that somehow by suffering, we're going to reap a better reward. But when really what gets us there is not purposefully putting ourselves into a state of suffering and, conquering our inner bitch or anything like that. But it's a matter of becoming the person who can do the thing with ease that I'm apprehensive about doing right now. So if we're talking to someone who has a business and they're like, I really suck at sales and I hate doing sales calls and I feel really awkward and uncomfortable asking for money. And so I'll be in a sales conversation with someone and I'm getting ready to give them the price. And without them even asking for it, I'll drop the price from what I was planning on doing it because I feel so awkward and uncomfortable about it. And in reality, that person sees what you offer and they want it and they're ready and willing to pay whatever you're about to ask for it. So you just hamstrung yourself, right? And let's face it, if you're going to go to someone and you have lofty goals on how you want to transform your health or transform your body, and you're expecting something like, a 12-week package that costs $5,000 because you see the results this person got, and someone is nervous and they're coming, oh, well, 12 weeks, it's $1,000. Are you going to be like, yeah, that sounds too cheap. So maybe this actually sucks, right? Like if I had a Lamborghini and I said, I'll sell you this Lamborghini for $800, would you buy it? Maybe, right? Or if I had a brand new MacBook and I said, hey, I'll sell you this for $15, you're going to want to know what's up. Like, why is this thing that is obviously valued so much greater than that? Why are you cutting the price down? There must be something wrong with it.
Yeah,
there must be something wrong with it, or there must be something wrong with how you got it. You're trying to sell me something that's stolen, right?
Yeah.
So how often do we do that when we're approaching a customer or a potential new client, right? But what we can do is program our mind the same way that I described with my son on the slide. We can go back and we can call that up. We have to practice that, right? We have to practice being in that state of mind. And I can look at the person sitting across the table from me or on the other end of the Zoom call or phone and say, okay, this person truly wants what I have. I know without any doubt at all, I know 100% as certain as the sun's coming up in the morning that if I can work with them, I can help them get there and they're willing to pay it. I know that it's worth what I'm asking for. When I get into that mentality, then it's not awkward and uncomfortable to ask for money anymore. And I think so many people, like we were talking about before we started recording, so many people in the health and wellness and fitness world want to help people and they want to, serve mankind. And that's noble and wonderful. But it's very difficult to do a lot of good in the world if you only are making, $30,000 a year, right? If you really want to do a lot of good in the world, go get yourself some money. And then you can put that money to work to do more good for people. It can help you express your vision more wholly and more completely.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Without a doubt. And that's one of the things, again, just growing up, thinking in that limited and scarcity mindset really has big issues when you grow up and actually trying to start a business and be an entrepreneur. No question about it.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
And this is one of the things that you did mention, and then I want to give you an opportunity to talk about what your new program and stuff, because I think there's a lot of fathers and men who are listening to this right now. And I think it's very, very valuable to share. Like you do mention just the belief that working harder does not necessarily work. And I know that you're really passionate about that specifically. So can you just dive into that? Because I know a lot of health coaches right now are just dealing with an incredible amount of burnout, just trying to just beat something down and get something to work just by sheer force. So if you could talk about that a drop.
Well, if we're talking about health and fitness people, let's tell a quick story that parallels what the working harder mentality actually winds up being, right? Mm-hmm. Let's say that you wanted to get in shape and you started a training program and you were doing, say, an hour a day, 4 days a week, and you were getting some results out of it, right? So if working harder or working more actually produces better results, why not train 3 hours a day and get results 3 times as fast, right? Mm-hmm. And some people will actually do that, but let's follow that to its logical conclusion. If that's really the way it is, let's completely take off work. Let's completely set aside anything else except training and train 16 hours a day, every single day for 3 months, and then you'll be Mr. Olympia. Right? It just doesn't work that way, because that concept of doing more and doing it harder actually goes against natural law, right? Right. And if everything has a period of time that has to unfold for it to grow and develop, right? Like, so if we're talking about parents, you find out that as a couple, you're going to have a baby, and you're really excited about it. After a month, you don't wonder where the baby is, right? You know that if you know that it takes 9 months for a human to develop before it's ready to be born, right? And so, and anything that gets it here quicker is usually to its detriment, to the detriment of the child, right? Mm-hmm. So there's natural cycles to this. And anytime that we decide, I'm just going to work harder, I'm just going to do more, we actually wind up going against the natural order of things. And you cannot go against the natural order of things and get good results. It just doesn't work, right? So what I am really interested in doing is helping dads understand that in relation to how their kids are developing, and do as I say, not as I do, does not, has not, and never will work. Our children are going to model what we do far more than learn from me attempting to explain it or actively teach it to them, right? And so what I have to do is decide who I want to be, what characteristics I want to instill, and then be that guy. And be that guy while I'm around my son as consistently as I possibly can. And for me, that comes back to a single simple principle by which I can track everything, right? Because this is the thing, like if I'm talking about getting stronger or losing body fat or whatever, that's something that is observable and trackable, right? Mm-hmm. We can look back 3 months and we can see what changes have happened. We can tweak things, make them better, eliminate things that aren't working, et cetera. Same thing with money and business, right? I can look back over the past 3 months and see where my lead generation strategies are working or aren't working. My Facebook ads perform well or they didn't perform well. My close rate on my sales calls, all of that stuff. We can look at that and track it, right? But when I say something about being the best parent I can be, or being the best role model for my son, or the way that I really like to put it is being the hero that my kid is looking for, so that he doesn't go find, Ass Clown 420 on TikTok and adopt that as his hero, the way that I did with Lou Ferrigno. That's a very intangible thing. How do you track that? Well, I got to the point that I realized that there's a very simple yes or no question that I can ask that drives my intention with this. And that is, my intention is, with every single interaction that I have with my son, after that interaction is over with, in some way, I want him to be better off than he was before that interaction. And I can look for that, right? And sometimes it can be like the sliding down the slide story, or the things associated with that. And sometimes it's not comfortable. It's actually quite difficult. Like a few weeks ago, or actually a couple months ago, was was my dad's birthday, and like I said, he passed away in 2020. We were pretty close, and so I was on his birthday feeling sad and grieving my dad, and my son comes up and he asks me why my face looks this way. And I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "You look sad." And I told him I am sad, and I explained to him why, because it was his grandpa who he doesn't remember, and that was my daddy, and I'm not going to be around him, and I can't hang out with him and do stuff like like my son and I are able to do. And he listened to him and he said, "Oh, okay," and he walks off and he goes and starts playing again, right? And I'm sitting there crying, and I'm realizing that after the fact, I didn't set out to do this as an intentional thing where I sat down and said, "This is what I'm going to teach my son right now." But what I did in the way that I expressed myself, it would have been so simple and so easy to be like, "Oh, there's nothing wrong, Daddy," or "There's nothing wrong, kid. Daddy's fine. And no, just don't worry about it." Mm-hmm. But he's picking up on the fact that I'm not happy, and I could have just, set those feelings aside and pretended there was nothing going on and tried to force myself to put on a front for him. But instead, I chose to be open and honest and vulnerable. And I realized after the fact, kind of after I was feeling better myself, that what I did there was show him an appropriate way for a grown man to express a very intense bout of grief. And that is a skill that he's going to need getting older, because we're all going to experience grief. If we live long enough, someone around us is going to leave our life in some way. They could, they could pass away. They could move away. We could lose a pet. There could be a breakup in a relationship, and all those things are associated with grief. So after the fact, I realized that I have internalized this concept of making sure that what I do leaves him better off, so much so that I'm becoming that man. And that was very gratifying for me. And that idea that whatever interaction I'm having with him will leave him better off somehow that's just a part of how I parent now. Mm-hmm. And I can look at any given situation and be like, did I do this? Yes or no? And so it becomes much easier to keep track of that, much like tracking weights in the gym or tracking numbers on a spreadsheet for your business. I can look back and say, okay, here and here and here I did it. Here I fell down on it, and I can know next time a situation like this comes up, I can react differently, or I can respond differently, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's another great example. You are like a fantastic father.
Thank you.
And again, like going back to now, this is really your passion is really to bring up this young man into a world that he's going to thrive in a variety of ways, because you do know that a lot of men struggle with that and dealing with emotions, grief, etc. And you've basically turned this new passion into a program that you are basically offering at this point. So I wanted to definitely give you an opportunity to talk about that. And, if you could couple that with the idea of like, how you so easily just say, hey, this is where I am now, and this is what I want to do. What gives you the courage to just present it out there and really just turn it into another business opportunity for yourself?
The project itself, I took a line from the book, The Science of Getting Rich by Wallace Wattles. There's a chapter in there, chapter 15, called The Advancing Man. Mm-hmm. And in that and multiple other places throughout that book, and you see this in a lot of metaphysical or self-help type stuff, is thrown around the idea of what's called the impression of increase. And we hear that in a business sense of sometimes it gets watered down to, well, under promise and over deliver to your clients, right? Provide more value than they expect. And he talks about that in the book, that like, if we're doing an exchange, if I am continually providing something that is worth more to you than the money that you gave me, then I will continually be putting the impression of increase on you. And so that's where the idea came from. How can I make sure that every interaction with my son leaves him better off somehow, right? That's literally the impression of increase applied to parenting. And when I started doing it, it's one of those things that initially it can be quite difficult to do, because it required me to change my perception and change the level of awareness of how I was interacting. I had to shine a light on anything that just came out habitually that I wasn't thinking about, because that's a conditioned response, right? And if the conditioned response doesn't match up with the person that I want to be, I have to go back and change the conditioning. And so that's what the Advancing Man Project is really all about, is helping dads go in and rewrite what I call their internal code. Internal code is the thing that is it's your operating system. It's your code of conduct. It's the way that you speak to yourself and about yourself. So I help you go in and identify unwanted aspects of that internal code, and then break them and replace them with things that serve you. And the next foray into that I'm going to be offering is on March 2nd. I think it is. Let me look at the calendar. Yeah, March 2nd. I'm going to be doing a workshop that'll be somewhere between 2 and 3 hours long, most likely. I'm going to give an overview of the entire process of how the Advancing Man Project coaching works. I'm going to, and it's not just like, I'm not just going to throw out like a couple of tips or a couple of hacks or anything like that. And it's not just a one long sales message either. Yes, I'm hoping that at the end of it, what I do and say will speak to some men, and they'll book a call with me and we can delve into it a little bit further. But the workshop itself, it's not a webinar, it's a workshop. We're going to do some hands-on stuff that is going to, by the end of that workshop, you'll have a few tips and techniques and strategies that you can take and literally apply the moment you get off the call to your own situation with your family and your children and all that, so that you can start to become their hero.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. Yeah, and I'm really looking forward to participating in that myself. It's going to be a really awesome workshop, and I definitely hope that the dads jump on and to take a listen as well, because again, like, this is stuff that men truly need, in just like you said, bringing up our own kids. And as you know, everything just funnels into the rest of your world as you become a better man overall. So that's awesome.
Thank you. Yeah, and I'm looking forward too. I'm excited. I'm on fire about this whole thing, and I'm driven by the idea that if enough of us as fathers start to show up for our kids in a way that is truly heroic for them, and we start to live our lives as the men that we want our children to become, that when our children look back and say, that's my daddy, and I learned this from him, and I'm so proud of him, and I'm proud of the fact that he's my dad. That's a very gratifying thing for me as a father, to be in that position, to think of my son looking back like that. But even bigger picture than that is, who are those children going to inspire, and what are they going to do moving forward, right? There's this concept that when I started putting all this together that I ran across, called the transitional character. And the transitional character is someone who, within the space of a single generation, radically alters the model of their own family, that it changes their entire family tree into the future.
Wow.
And that can be for good or bad. But for myself, I choose to put it in a positive light. And I'm like, okay, how can I affect future generations of my family, so that my family can affect future generations of the rest of the world at large, and just make the world a better place? And I know that sounds kind of corny, but I really don't care if it sounds corny or not, because that's heartfelt. That's where I'm coming from. And, there's enough bad stuff going on in the world that we could sit around and complain about. Rather than sit around and complain about the bad stuff, let's get to work becoming better men and better fathers, so that our kids have the heroes that they need, and they can go out and be someone else's hero.
Yeah, no, listen, I love it. I love it. So, Dave, got to give you that opportunity to how we can get in touch with you, website, social media handles.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I talked about the workshop and didn't.
No, you did it at the end of the show. So that's usually where we give that opportunity. All good.
If you're interested in learning more about it, you want to join me for the next workshop, go to advancingmanproject.com. And there'll be a spot on there that you can put your name and email in. You'll get on the list then. You'll be updated with all the stuff that's coming. The workshop itself is on March 2nd, and I think I'm going to do it at 12 noon Central Time. And like I said, it'll run for probably 2 or 3 hours. It will be, I have every intention of recording it. I can't say that it will be recorded because some of the technological aspects of stuff I've either hit record and it's disappeared into the cloud, or I've neglected to record it because I'm so excited to do the presentation or whatever. So I can't guarantee that there'll be a recording, but I intend to have a recording that'll be up for a little bit after that. So if the time doesn't match up with whatever time zone you're in or wherever you are in the world or what you're doing with your life at that particular moment, there'll be a replay for it. But it's advancingmanproject.com to get your spot reserved at the workshop. And also you get on my mailing list after that. And I send out all sorts of fun stuff with my email. And as far as social media goes, if you just look for my name, Dave Whitley, and the words Iron Tamer, which was my stage name, Iron Tamer Dave Whitley, as a performing strongman, then you'll find me. I'm not hard to find online. Just look for Iron Tamer and I'll show up.
Sounds good. And I'll absolutely include this in the show notes as well. So Dave, thanks so much for joining me on a Sunday morning. I appreciate your time, and really excited about sharing this with the audience.
Thank you so much for having me. You guys have an awesome day.
You too. Hope you enjoyed listening to today's episode of the Health Coach Academy podcast. If you did, jump over to iTunes and leave a rating and or review. It goes a long way in helping get this message out to our fellow health coaches and people in our industry. Also, if you can, jump over to my website, omarcumberbatch.com, where I give out a lot of freebies, including my 5-day sugar challenge for people who are having issues with sugar. And also for health coaches, I have the book, Hidden. It's the 6 not so obvious ways to get your clients unstuck. Have a great day.